would like to start with the story. My parents were Holocaust survivors. I want to start with the story of the old world. This old rabbi was sitting in his study and studying the Holy Bible, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and he says, "Come in," and one of his congregants come in and start telling him about how he has a dispute with his partner and how his partner didn't treat him fairly and what he had to do and how it's going and what's going on. And the man talks and talks and talks about 15 and 20 minutes. The rabbi listens attentively and looks at him and he says, "You know, you're right." And the man walks out feeling very pleased, very happy with himself. A couple of minutes later, there's another knock on the door. And the man's partner comes in. And he starts railing against his partner. And he says, "Rabbi, can you believe what my partner did? He did this and this and this and this." And he goes on and on and on. And the rabbi listens patiently and wisely to everything he says. And finally looks at him and says, "You know, you're right." And the man feels really good. He gets up and he walks out. And his wife, known as the Rebbitzin, is in the kitchen next door. And she hears all of this going on. And she comes in and she goes, "My dear husband, how can you do that? How can you tell the first gentleman that he's right and then tell the second gentleman that he's right? They can't both be right." And the rabbi looks at her and says, "You know, you're right." So I want to talk about dispute resolution. Disputes, why do they occur? What happens? What do we feel like when that happens? Why we have them? And what brings up for us? So, and this is the part, the audience participation part. Why is it that we have disputes? Why do people fight? And what does it feel like to you when you're fighting with somebody? Different goals. The two people have different goals, and of course, they're not going to see eye to eye. They'll want to approach different paths. What other reason might there be? Different expectations. So people want different things, and so they're upset. Different priorities and values. And so the values draw what happens, and so when people have different priorities, then they'll want different things.
Somebody's having a problem with somebody else, and they take it out on you.
Somebody's having a problem with somebody else, and they take it out on you.
I'll show you the email.
I'll show you the emails, he says. So, in other words, I may be upset with somebody else, but I come home and I take it out on my partner. And so that's something that happens, and that's something we should be aware of. What other reasons? Why might people fight? Hubris.
Just big-headedness. They always have to be correct, no matter what the stance is.
Somebody feels like they always have to be correct. So in other words, to sort of elaborate on that, for me to back down might be a hit to my ego. I have to have a strong enough ego to back down and let you be right. Some people need to be right just because they need to be right. They're so insecure that if they weren't right, then their ego would take a hit that they can't tolerate. So they have to keep fighting. Okay? Any other suggestions? How about people have different facts? People think of things differently. People see somebody has one belief and they believe one set of facts and somebody else. Very popular today. This is going on a lot, where people they get their information from different places. If you get different information from different places, if you don't start off from a joint, the joint factual basis, you're going to come out to different places. What do we feel like when we have a dispute? So what does that bring up? How do I feel when I have to make a phone call, when I get a phone call, when I know I have to have a really difficult conversation with somebody? What does that do to me? A lot of frustration, agita, sort of upset. Anything else?
Guilt.
I'm sorry?
Guilt.
Okay, for not being able to work it out, maybe feeling like a failure, maybe how do I have this difficult conversation? Any other suggestions? Anxiety. How do I deal with this? A lot of people, this is common, people don't often know this, but there's a cost when somebody's in litigation. If they get a nasty letter Monday morning, their entire week is shot. you can't do any work, your brain is mulling over it. And so besides the financial costs, there's an emotional cost to being involved in litigation. And that's something people who want to start a lawsuit should know about. So we have that. We might feel disrespected. We might feel devalued. What do you mean? Why don't you take my opinion? And so there's the ego involved. Again, we might have different risk tolerances. So if I'm okay making a bet and somebody else isn't, then we might have a dispute over whether we should do something. And people have different ways of reasoning. So you may have inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, and we'll get to all of that. People might fear fear, anger, resentment are some of the feelings that people will have. So what is the goal of an argument? When people have an argument, when you're involved in dispute resolution, when you're meeting with somebody, what are your goals?
Letting the other side know how you feel.
Let them know how I feel. So just sharing feelings, and hopefully the person is caring enough and sensitive enough that they'll respect it and that they'll honor that and that they won't use it. The reason I'm elaborating is because for many of us that feels very vulnerable. If I tell somebody I'm feeling scared, I'm not feeling loved, that I have to be secure enough to be able to share that.
To arrive at the truth.
To arrive at the truth. So it could be, okay, let's get our shared factual basis. Let me explain to you what I know and you don't. Or it might also be getting to the right answer. So we need to decide whether we're going to switch jobs, whether I'm going to switch jobs, whether my partner's going to switch jobs. And what happens if we make the wrong decision? How do we feel if we make the wrong decision?
We have to reset and start again.
Start again. So there's an element of fear there, and angst. And fear has this concept of shutting down the prefrontal cortex and drives you in a very singular focus. So when people are in the grips of fear, they can't think a whole lot about it. So one of my favorite slides is two women talking, where one of them says, yes, we finally hashed out the prenuptial agreement, but I'm never going to speak to him again. And so the question is, when we're resolving the dispute, perhaps one of the elements we should be looking at is the preservation of the relationship itself. So part of it is, do we change jobs or not? But if I lose the relationship in resolving the dispute, I may have won the battle but lost the war. So that becomes a focus that a lot of people don't often consider, because we're so focused on what it is that we're fighting about. Sometimes people have to show up the other side, they have to demonstrate their dominance, maybe demonstrate their independence, look, I can do this, maybe avoid blame the other, score points. So there are a number of different reasons that people have to win. There are a number of different reasons that people feel compelled to fight. Most of us, when we're fighting, we feel compelled to fight. And so if you can imagine a dispute resolution process, what would be the attributes of a great dispute resolution process? So if I showed you a number of different processes, and so what would you want to make sure that that process has for it to be the most effective one?
Both sides win.
Both sides win. That's a great answer. So in other words, so we find a way that everybody gets what they want to get. And we'll come back to that. We'll speak about that in a while. What other attributes could we think of for a dispute resolution process? The final decision would be one that can be implemented, so it has to be a practical result. If we reach an agreement, but the end result is not practical, I'll add to that it be durable, that it continue. Maybe something that considers all of the other stakeholders. So maybe between us it's great, but the children won't like it, the grandparents won't like it, and so it can't last. Or the two office mates do it, but the boss won't go along with it. So it has to last, it has to be durable, it has to be acceptable to all the stakeholders. I think we spoke about before maybe that it doesn't further deteriorate the relationship, that it preserves the relationship, maybe even improves the relationship. So if we can find a dispute resolution mechanism that brings us closer together, that has value too, in addition to making sure that we get the right result, whatever the right result is. Maybe one that doesn't feel abusive or intimidating to the other party. So if I might scream at my partner and then they'll fold, but at the end of the day they feel intimidated. So that's probably not a good process. Even if I win, even if I get my way, but the damage that it does to the other person, or if I get screamed at. And so that might not be a good result. We want something that reaches a wise resolution. We want something that's efficient, and maybe something that thinks outside the box. And something I'm going to come back to is that it shouldn't be a power-based resolution, like who's stronger, who can beat up on the other, because nobody likes to be taken advantage of. If it's based on power, then it's not going to work out. So we might want something that allows every person to save face, it doesn't destroy the relationship, maybe preserves the harmony, maybe empathy and understanding, where you can share your feelings and have the other person acknowledge it and understand it. It empowers people so that they maintain control of their own destiny. So sometimes you go to a judge, the judge decides, the judge will make a decision. The judge doesn't know about you and your spouse and your children, and then you and your spouse are not in control. Now there's somebody in a black robe who's making decisions that are going to affect your family for the rest of their lives. So there's value in having the parties themselves maintain their decision-making process, their autonomy, their right to control their lives. And we feel better about the result, even if we get the same result, and I've often advocated this. If a judge can order a man to pay $1,000 a week in child support, or he can voluntarily agree to pay $1,000 in child support, if he does that voluntarily, he will be much more likely to do it happily, to not challenge it, to stay more involved with his children. And so retaining autonomy over your own destiny is important, even if you get to the same result. So I want to challenge you and think about a dispute resolution mechanism, what it could be like. We do have dispute resolution mechanisms that satisfy all these better ways, and you can look at any dispute, instead of looking at it as, oh no, I've got a dispute, but look at it as an exciting opportunity, an intellectual challenge to learn something new, to create a better relationship, to forge a stronger relationship with your partner, and work together on the problem so that it brings you closer together. Problems occur in every area of life, as Dave has said, and so this applies both to personal lives, to business lives, professional lives. You can't escape disputes. The question is how you deal with it, how you handle it. So, who am I, and what gives me the right to talk to you about dispute resolution? Well, I've been resolving disputes I've been studying dispute resolution. I've been a mediator for 27 years, resolving disputes in both the commercial context and the personal family law context. And I serve as an arbitrator in small claims court. And this is after I was an associate at some of the most prestigious law firms in the country. And this was after I clerked in the Eastern District of New York for Judge Edward R. Corman. And so I got to be in his chambers, help him, assist him in writing his decisions. Had the unique fortune of being able to look at a smart, wise judge and say, Judge, why did you rule that way? I was sure you would have gone the other way on that, and understand what his reasoning process was like. I attended Brooklyn Law School a little later in life. I did rather well there, and I was a bulldog litigator. I won unwinnable cases. I walked into one case where the judge looked at me. I was the fourth lawyer on the case. The judge looked at me and said, Counselor, you know your client's got 1 foot in Rikers. And I said, yes, I know. Showed up 4 weeks later, had a 2-hour oral argument in front of the judge, turned the judge's head around so that she understood that my client was a knight in shining armor, was the white guy, and it was the other side that was just spinning her head around. Turned the judge's head completely around. So I do that. However, I prefer reaching agreements. I'm most proud of the situation where I'm litigating a case, but I'm able to, I hear somebody say something and I'm like, I can play off of that, and I manage to work out a resolution without going scorched earth tactics and without reaching an agreement. So okay. I also published an article in the New York Law Journal last year called Divorce Without Destruction. Happy to share that with you, with anyone you want. So my goals here today are to give you a new perspective on dispute resolution, suggest non-destructive ways of working with disputes, give you skills that you can implement, that you can utilize and use immediately in your personal and professional lives, so that you'll never meet me or any of my colleagues in your personal lives. And hopefully whet your appetite to study more about dispute resolution, give you some more resources that you can then use to learn more about it. Conflict, of course, exists everywhere. There's no escaping conflict. Machiavelli says that if not for conflict, society would stagnate. And so conflict becomes, you can look at conflict as an opportunity to advance and to improve society. So I want to start. I've been collecting people's perception. I've been collecting best books for about 20 years. And the first of 4 books that have dramatically changed my life is Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And Carnegie's basic fundamental principle number 1 is everybody thinks they're a good guy. There's nobody who thinks he's a bad guy. He's got chapter 1, he's got a great story. I won't repeat it now. But I was slapped upside the head, I wanted to say a year ago. Turns out it's a couple more years. As you get older, the time goes. But as you recall, a short while ago, El Chapo was recaptured. Now, El Chapo wasn't a really good guy. As you know, he's the largest drug dealer in the world. He's responsible for 34,000 deaths. Okay? According to reports, he had somebody killed just because the guy refused to shake his hand, and he had people tortured. He wasn't really a good guy. But the reason El Chapo was captured was a week before he was captured, he gave the interview to Sean Penn. And because he liked the actress that Sean Penn was friends with, and so he gave him an interview. And what did he tell Sean Penn? He tells Sean Penn, I never started any trouble. Sure, if they attacked me, I defended myself, but I never started any trouble. So El Chapo thought he was a good guy. And as my head is still spinning around from how right Carnegie was in his prediction, everybody thinks they're a good guy, I was just hit with another headline in the New York Times about how now that it's 50 years later, the State of Israel released a letter, copies of a handwritten letter that Adolf Eichmann sent to the then president of Israel. And in the letter, now, Adolf Eichmann, of course, was the architect of the final solution. My parents were Holocaust survivors. My mother was in Auschwitz. And so this is the man responsible for killing 3 out of my 4 grandparents and just about their entire families. And yet, what does he write in his letter? He says, yeah, there's a need to draw a line between the leaders that were responsible, but people like me were mere instruments in the hands of leaders. We're not really responsible. We were just doing our jobs. So people think that way about themselves. So remember this. So Carnegie says, if this is what Eichmann and El Chapo say, then imagine when you have a fight with your brother-in-law, sister-in-law, mother-in-law, father-in-law, with your boss, and you start talking to the person with disgust, and you go, you really think, how could you think, I can't believe you did this. Remember that even El Chapo thinks he's a good guy. And so certainly the people we deal with, and the moment you start talking down to people, then it doesn't, it stops all communication. And then, of course, instead of bringing you closer together, it pushes you further apart. Another really great book is Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman and Tversky won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics, and they talk about the different brains and the fast brain and the slow brain, and how and how it forms what we're thinking. And I want to talk for a moment about this idea of anchoring. Anchoring being once an idea gets planted in your head, then it's a lot harder to dislodge. And I want to try this little demonstration. Let's see if it works. What do we see here? Anybody? Excuse me? A man's face. Okay. So I want to show you pictures of man's face, and please raise your hand when you see something differently. Okay? So here we have a man's face. Right? Man's face. Okay, 2 hands went up. Another 2 went up. Well, these are going to get progressively. Okay, so now we have probably close to majority is number 6. And of course, number 7, I assume everybody sees something different. And number 8, of course. Okay, so here's here's a point that this is intended to demonstrate. If you didn't start off with picture number 1, you likely would have seen the woman a lot quicker and a lot sooner than number 6 or 7. Some people picked it up at about, I think, image number 3 or 4. If you just showed somebody, if you walked up to somebody and showed them image number 3, they might see the woman. But because you start off with seeing this picture gets anchored in your mind, and therefore it's harder for you to change. It's like when you're driving down and one of your tires gets in the recessed tire tracks, and now to get out of that, when you want to turn the car, you have to use extra force to get it out. And so this demonstrates Kahneman's principle of anchoring, that once an idea gets anchored in your mind, and that becomes important for a whole lot of reasons. So perception colors reality, and in sales, we used to say perception is reality. A client's perception is their reality. So you always have to deal with a client's perception. A landlord is always warm, a tenant is always cold. They tell you, if you're a haberdasher, always sell the suit before you sell the sweater. Because if you sell a $400 suit, a $70 sweater is not going to seem like a whole lot of money. If you try selling the sweater first, $70, the person may not spend that. But if you sell a high-ticket item first, then it doesn't. So show a rundown apartment before you show the really nice one, because then it looks like a real deal. And then we have, of course, Bob Cialdini talks about the 3-pail experiment, where you fill 1 pail with hot water, 1 pail with cold water, and the middle pail with tepid, lukewarm water. And you ask people to stick their 2 hands into the 2 outer pails, and you let their hands become acclimated to it, and then you have them take their hands out of the 2 outer pails and put it into the same middle pail and watch their face, where they have 2 hands in the same pail of water, and one hand feels burning hot and the other hand feels burning cold, but they know it can't be because it's the same water. But yet it feels that way because when you're coming out of the hot, it feels cold. When you're coming out of the cold, it feels hot. So what we think is our reality is our perception. And if the person you're dealing with has a different perception, then of course they may come to different spaces. So keep that in mind, that people's perception change where they go and how they think and what they want to do. And of course, people with different values negotiate differently. So Thomas Kilman created a conflict scale, and they spoke about the 4 different types of people. So the first thing to know is how important is achieving the goal to you, and how important is it to the relationship. So if you don't care about the relationship and you don't care about the goal, you're low on the both, you're an avoider. You just don't bother. You don't care. You don't do anything. If you care about the goals, but you don't care about the relationship, then you're a competitor. Then you just want to win. You don't care. You'll run over people. You just want to win. If you care about the relationship and not so much about what you're doing, then you'll be an accommodator. Yeah, whatever you want, that's good. I'll do whatever you want. If you care about both of them sort of halfway, then you're a compromiser. But if you care about them both really a lot, then you're a collaborator. And of course, there are different times when you want to use different focuses and different goals. So in some place where a really quick decision has to be made in a complicated area and you don't have time to generate consensus, then you may want to be a competitive type, but understand that damages the relationship. If you have employees and you need to bring them along, if you have business partners, you may have to usher them in. So we may want to use different techniques as we're doing this. Somehow, I learned about this at the ABA dispute resolution section meeting, and the speaker had the different lawyers and psychologists in the group. They said, if you consider yourself a competitor, go into one corner. If you consider yourself a collaborator, go into another. And we self-selected. And somehow, I don't know how this happened, but I ended up being the spokesperson for the competitive group. I don't know how. So, of course, people have different goals, they use different techniques, and the different techniques might not be compatible. So recognize that when you're doing that. And then, of course, people speak differently. Men, women speak differently. When a woman says, do you need the bathroom? That isn't a request for information. That's the equivalent of saying, I need the bathroom, pull in at the next rest stop. Men typically say, oh, no, that's fine, and they keep going. And then 3 hours later, she's upset, and he doesn't know why. And when she says, "Are you hungry there?" that doesn't mean, "Do you want to stop to eat?" It means, "I want to stop to eat." Most guys don't know that. Okay? So we have that. So Deborah Tannen studied the different ways that men and women speak differently. She wrote a book called You Just Don't Understand, and it's a fascinating book. But I love she came out more recently with a book about women and their relationships with their mothers. And she called that book, You're Wearing That? And so this is a whole study, and I encourage you to go after that. One of my favorite stories is a man is on the FDR on his way home, calls his sweetheart and says, "Honey, I'm on the FDR, I'm coming home." And invariably her next question is, "When are you going to be home?" End of vignette. Every guy who hears a story says, "What a dumbass question." Every woman who hears a story goes, "But of course." And we just don't connect. And the reason for that is what the woman is really, the guy is thinking, "Well, I just gave you all the information I have. What more do you want from me? I don't know what traffic is. I don't know if I got caught up. I told you I'm on 96th Street on the West Side Highway." And what the woman is really saying is, "Honey, I miss you. I wish I were in your arms right now holding you." So apparently the response to, "Honey, when will you be home?" is, "I love you too."
She may also be asking because she's preparing dinner. And she wants to know, do I start it now or should I wait? What?
She's preparing dinner, and so she may need to know.
Or maybe she wants him to come home so he can prepare dinner. Misogynist.
Thank you. Or maybe I'm getting a manicure, pedicure, and I want to be picked up. I don't know.
Okay. And then, of course, we have the men who go into man cave and who can't speak about the issues, and the women are, "Why can't they talk to me?" And I'll leave that for another day about why that happens. So we spoke about a whole lot of issues about what happens. And so the big question is, how do we resolve disputes? What's a good, practical, efficient way to resolve disputes without damaging the relationship? We have a bowl of jelly beans. How do we resolve who gets a jelly beans or not? Well, it turns out that the Harvard Negotiation Project has been studying this for many years, and the most fantastic book on this is written by, this forms the basic primer of all mediation, all negotiation courses by Professors Fisher, Uri, and Patton, called Getting to Yes. Absolutely required reading in law school and in other schools. And they talk about principled negotiation instead of positional bargaining. So instead of I want it, it's like, what do you need it for? What are you trying to accomplish? So people generally think that there are two options. I could either be a hard negotiator or I could be a soft negotiator. Soft negotiator means I give in about everything, and the problem with that is at the end of the day I feel abused, I feel taken advantage of, I don't feel like I've been respecting my rights, I sort of cede control over my rights, and I cease being the person who I want to be. That's by being a soft negotiator. So it takes a toll on the person's self and on the person's psyche. A hard negotiator might win, everything is a race, everything is competitor, drive as hard as you can, but that can take a toll on the relationship. So Fisher and Uri say that there's a whole different way of doing this. So it doesn't have to be an endurance contest. There's a better way of doing this. Separate the people from the problem. Be soft on the people and hard on the problem. We have a problem. We can't meet the mortgage. How do we meet that issue? And so it's not about attacking the person. It's not about being hard on the person. Be soft on the people, hard on the problem. So again, I'm not doing any of these concepts justice. Each one of these concepts is worthy of a whole day seminar. I'm just touching on this to give you a sense of this. Hopefully you can apply some of these in your own life, and I'm giving you the resources about how to get more information about it. And so they talk about focusing on the interests. What do you want it for instead of what do you want? And so the famous story of the two people fighting over an orange. I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. Finally, one of them grows impatient, pulls out a pocket knife, and cuts the darn orange in half. The first guy takes his half of the orange, walks away, peels the orange, throws away the peel, eats the fruit. The next guy takes his half of the orange, peels the orange, throws away the fruit, and uses the peel to bake a cake. And you go, If only one of them would have stopped and said, what do you want the orange for? If we would have known that he's hungry and wants to eat the fruit, and he needs the zest of the orange to bake his cake, you could have had the whole orange and you could have had the whole orange. Very often when people come, people have a tendency of bottom lining what they want. In order for me to get this, I need that. And so they tell you what they think they need without understanding what's really motivating them. And then when the buttheading occurs, it's because people's positions seem like they are diametrically opposed. If I get the whole orange, and you can't get the whole orange. If you get the whole orange, I can't get the whole orange. And so it's not without understanding what it is that you need, getting to the interest behind the position that lets you think about how can I satisfy your interest and satisfy the other person's interest as well. And that forms the biggest part of the mediation process that I do. I've had people fighting for 3, 4, 5 years, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on litigation, and in 5 hours they're shaking hands and walking out. So it's amazing, it's God's work. And so part of this is inventing options for mutual gain. I think you mentioned it before, finding a win-win resolution. How do you get what you want and I get what I want? And part of a principle of this is using objective criteria. So instead of saying, I want it, say, okay, let's maybe agree that we'll use fairness as an issue. Let's talk about who gets the jelly beans. What's fair to do with the jelly beans? Then you might say, well, I paid for it. I should get the jelly beans. And then I might say, well, you got the jelly beans last time, and so I should get it this time. And you might say, well, you're going to eat them, and I'm going to put them in the window display in my storefront. I'm going to make thousands of dollars off of it, so it's more valuable to me. And the more we talk about fairness, it can bring us closer together because we understand each other's interests. And it certainly doesn't drive us further apart. Now, a very important part of this is to show people value as you're speaking to them. So just the act of listening to them shows them that you value them. And that becomes so important. And that's probably the biggest sort of behind the scenes. It's not what you do, but it's how you do it that actually makes it. And you could just, by looking at pictures, as I was selecting images for this presentation, and it's funny, you can go through 500 images and you go, wait, I like this. This demonstrates something. It's not something you can't describe it, you can't put your finger on it, but we all see it, we know it, the feelings that it evokes in us. So when you're listening to somebody else and they feel you listening, they feel you interested, and it evokes the emotion, just giving them that respect. So respect is made up of the Latin cores, re as in doing again, and spect as in looking at somebody. When you take another look at it and you find it something to value in the person, and the person feels it. So even if you don't agree, it becomes easier for that person to agree with you and to work things out. So the other major point is the distinction between fighting fairly and fighting unfairly. Dr. John Gutman of UCLA, some Berkeley or California somewhere, has been studying this. He says he took like hundreds of couples, videotaped them, asked them, they went into his fighting lab and asked them to have a disagreement about something. And he says he can predict with 95% accuracy whether they will stay together or whether they will leave or whether they will get divorced. And the difference is not, people think that people who love each other, who stay together, don't fight as much as people who don't. He says that's not true. They fight just as often, but they fight differently. They fight fairly, and it doesn't spiral out of control. So he wrote a book called Why Marriages Succeed and Fail, and he talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And the first one is criticism, criticizing the other person. In other words, you can disagree with somebody. You can say, no, honey, let's not go there, let's go there. But the moment you say, oh, you're too cheap to pay me, you don't want to go there, or you eat any junky food, now you're criticizing the person instead of having a discussion about which restaurant we go to. So that's when that starts happening, you know your marriage is spiraling down, criticizing one another. Next is contempt, the biggest deal breaker, the biggest signal that something's going awfully wrong, that if it's not repaired quickly, it signals the demise of the relationship. And the third one is defensiveness, when somebody becomes really defensive when you tell them. And the final one, he calls stonewalling, I call it withdrawal, when the person just withdraws from the conversation. So this is what contempt looks like, and it is critical to the relationship, or eye rolling and or withdrawing and saying, I'm just not dealing with this. You can talk as much as you want, I'm done. Now that's different than saying, I need 10 minutes. Honey, let's stop talking about this now. Let's come back to it in 10 or 15 minutes, or let's pick this up tomorrow. I'm tired, I'm hungry. Can we discuss this tomorrow? That's fair. But just shutting down, saying, I don't want to talk to you about this, that isn't. So, the number one thing, and I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit, the number one thing that's a killer for when you have to resolve disputes, number one is have patience. If you don't have patience, if you need to get the dispute resolved, you're going to speak differently, you're not going to have a chance to work it out, you're not going to be able to shepherd the person through and bring them in. So make sure you have enough time and patience to do this in the way. So as you see, sort of listening carefully and attentively, there's an expression in sales, when you ask for the customer to sign the sales order, the old salesman's expression is, he who talks first loses. Ask for the order and then let it sit there and have the patience and let it go. Let the person speak, let them think about it. I want to come back because this is really important, the power of listening. The most important thing you can do in a relationship, in a fight, in any situation, if you want to establish rapport, if you've taken sales training, building rapport is all about listening. And there's the old salesman's expression is, God created man with 2 ears and 1 mouth. He should listen at least twice as much as he talks. And the act of listening is so crucial. Now, listening doesn't mean sort of halfway listening and not really paying attention, just letting the other person talk. I'm talking about listening, not in order to respond, not to jump in, not to interrupt, not to refute what you're saying to show you how you're wrong. Just truly listening, just listening to what's going on. I just want to hear what you have to say. And you can't imagine how cathartic that is. Somebody can be really angry, really pained, and really upset. Now here's a trick, here's a mediator's technique worth the price of admission. A mediator's technique to reduce your partner's anger by 50% immediately. If you want to know whenever your partner's angry at you, bring the tension down, bring the simmering down by 50% with one simple thing. But it comes with a danger sign, so I'm going to come back to that. The technique is repeat back to the person, repeat back to the person what they've said to you. Let me see if I understand, honey. You think that because I showed up late last night to our 13th anniversary celebration at the restaurant, that means that I don't value you and I don't value our relationship. Did I understand it? Did I leave anything out? And then invariably the other person will say, yes, well, you didn't put in that I had my hair done and I bought the shoes and I spent a lot of money. Okay, so let me see if I'm getting this. You spent a lot of money, you spent a lot of time and energy and effort preparing, and then when I didn't show up, that you thought that meant, you feel like that means that I disrespected our relationship. Did I get it? Did I leave anything out? And of course, when you ask, did I leave anything out, you let them repeat. And this, wash, rinse, and repeat. Go over it again and again. Make sure you get everything. The reason this is so powerful is most of us, all of us human beings, all we want to do is to be deeply understood and acknowledged and valued for who we are. And we live in this hyper-velocity life that we're all surrounded by people and we're alone in the crowd. And just having another person listen to you is the greatest gift you can give somebody. And once they know, the reason we're all frustrated is because we don't feel heard, we don't feel understood. The moment somebody hears you, then all of a sudden, like, okay, they heard me. Maybe they disagree with me, but they heard me. And that will bring the anger, the tension down by 50% just like that. Now, the really danger, and this is for us old timers, we might recognize, who here recognizes this? Danger, Will Robinson, danger, right? The big danger for this is to let even a hint, a note of facetiousness creep into your voice. So you mean to tell me that? So you really believe that? And that's like pouring gasoline onto the embers. That'll make it intensify rather than minimize. So be sure you're even keel, you objectively state back why the person is angry at you, and be sure that you eliminate any hint of facetiousness. Okay, So we instantly know what the other person is doing, like what are reflecting other people. You know what the people are feeling. You take a look at the picture, you know it all. You hear somebody talking. Now, the power of this, I was just hit by this last week. Luckily for me, that this last week, the New York Times reported how an Austrian woman was kidnapped and taken in, and she knew she was going to die. He rammed her bicycle, he pulled her in, and when he took off her blindfold, she noticed some orchids. And she told him, "Oh wow, you have orchids, you must take really good care of them. I've got orchids too. And they're so delicate, they need a lot of care." And he started talking about the orchids. He started talking about his girlfriends. He started talking about his mother and how his mother was a drunk and how he had trouble. And she says, "Well, you know, I've got a 13-week-old baby at home and he needs his mother too." His kidnapper drove her home. She saved her life just by listening and starting up a conversation about this. And we could talk more about this, but my time is going to run. So this is about therapists. Psychotherapy is a lot more effective when patients believe that the therapist is empathetic to them. That's the single greatest thing. So when people fight, number one, whenever somebody is screaming, that means that you've lost control of reason. You can no longer describe what you're doing. You can no longer describe what you're saying. And so now it's the equivalent of lying down on the floor and banging your hands and feet against the floor. Let me scream. Let me throw a tantrum. Understand that whenever you're screaming at somebody, whenever somebody's screaming at you, that means that they've given up on any hope of reason. I've had a judge's law clerk scream at me, and finally, after 10 or 15 minutes, I looked at the clerk and I said, "Why are you screaming at me?" And he was taken aback as if I had slapped him. And he goes, "Wow, I'm really frustrated." And had he asked me one question like, "Why did you take the position you took?" I was waiting for an invitation to share that with him. So be present in the moment when you're having these conversations. Be genuinely curious. Try to understand the other person. Ask them questions. Be open-minded. Generally ask people, don't tell. And be ready to change your perspective. So I want to share with you a story coming from Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power, in the city in the 1500 in Florence, in the church of Santa Maria del Fiore. Am I saying that right? There was this big block of marble that some apprentice had drilled a hole through it, ruined the entire block of marble. And some people thought, hey, I know this 26-year-old sculptor, he might be able to do something with it. Every guy's like, no, you can't do it, you can't do it. And this kid by the name of Michelangelo, yeah, and he said, oh, I can do something. Like, you can't do anything with it. He says, yeah, let me give it a shot. So the mayor let him try. And he goes ahead and he sculpts David out of this rock. And as he's almost done, so this is Michelangelo sculpting David, and as he's almost done, the mayor comes in, and this is Mayor Piero Soderini, and he looks at it, he goes, yeah, it's a pretty nice statue, but you got the nose wrong. And so instead of arguing with him, Michelangelo said, come with me. And as he starts walking up the scaffolding, he grabs a handful of marble dust in one arm and a hammer and chisel in the other hand, and walks up with the mayor and positions the mayor at a different angle so he changes his perspective. Michelangelo continues climbing up to the nose, bangs a little bit on the nose, and as he's banging, he allows the marble dust to come falling out of his arm, out of his hand, and then he steps back. He says, what do you think now? And the mayor goes, now you got it. Now it's perfect. And so he made the mayor happy. So things are not always what they seem. What do you see here? These are either two people, or this is a vase, and this is either a dirty picture for us men or two stick figures dancing in contrapose to one another. So it's all about perspective. So remember, sometimes it's easier to go around somebody than going beneath them, and then going through them. And there's a whole lot more to share with you, but I will go through this. And I've got resources here. So when you or your friend or family needs a lawyer, would you rather have a bookish lawyer or somebody who's emotionally intelligent? Do you want a fighter, or do you want a mediator, dispute resolver? And the truth is, you need everything, because depending on the circumstances, you need them both. I've been thinking long and hard about this. So to be a great lawyer, you need the substance, you need the technical skill, the book smarts, the psychological skill, the interpersonal skills, plus the skill in knowing how to develop, and the strategy and tactics, the hard work, the creativity, plus flexibility and nimbleness, and that's what gets you exceptional results for our clients. And so I shepherd clients through the terror of divorce. I'm happy if we have time to take any questions or to share my resource list with you, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
So do you have a question?
I have to give you a standing ovation. Absolutely amazing. Seriously. We'll be using advocates.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
I don't
Go.
have a
Yeah.
question, but I'd like to just say that everything that you shared resonated with me on different levels. You can't hear me? I'd like to just say that all of what you shared resonated with me on different levels, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I didn't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
There's
David?
If you, hi, great presentation. Do you have a couple minutes, maybe 2 minutes, to cover what happens when you have a high conflict situation and one person does not want to come to the table and sit down and discuss it, versus the other one is trying to resolve it? Are there a couple guidelines that you could give us to go through? Because we all deal with a high conflict situation when we're dealing with two people that are trying to come to a decision. Is there some tips you could give us to kind of get us from A to B?
The question is on high conflict cases where one party doesn't want to come to the table. How do you deal with that? One party wants to mediate, one party wants to be reasonable, the other party is just not, and how do you do that? I would start with trying to understand the person. So I had a client dub me the divorce whisperer because I got her a get, a Jewish divorce, when a dozen other people weren't able to. And she told me you had the perfect blend of iron fist and velvet glove. If you had been any softer with him, he would have bulldozed you. If you had been any tougher with him, he would have backlashed against you. And so I would start with understanding what's going on for the person who doesn't want to come to the table. What are they? Are they afraid? Are they angry? Are they worried? When I start my mediations, I was doing a divorce mediation, and the wife's lawyer sitting here to this side, so I was think of this, was saying, no, start with the money. I'm like, we'll get there. And we started working on what's going on. Why are you upset? What's happening? And the moment you deal with the people's emotional issues, the rest of it starts to fall in, because so often, as we said, what we're fighting about is not really what we're fighting about. We're fighting for power, we're fighting for recognition, we're fighting for our sense of self. And so the moment we set that, going back to the respect, the moment you show somebody respect, and so I start with let's talk about principles. So number one is understanding the other person. Why is he so upset? So if I were litigating or negotiating against that person, I would start with what is it that person is seeking? How do I help them? If I'm representing one party in a divorce, how do I help the other party get the healing that they need so that they can come to the table so that I can take advantage of them on behalf of my client?
Excellent.
I have a story. My former husband handled divorces as part of his practice of the very, very wealthy. And it was a very contentious divorce. And one of the stipulations of the wife was that she get 10 minutes to scream at her husband. And he was not allowed to say anything against her. And for that, she agreed to maybe $5, 10, $15 million less. And so we're talking very, very wealthy. But to your point of, what is it that people really want? They were fighting about probably $100, $200 million. But in order for her to walk away with that 5, 10, 15 million less, I don't remember what it was.
He said
He said yes. He said yes.
To just repeat, one of the conditions of the financial settlement was that the wife was willing to take the amount that was offered, which was 10 or 15 million less than she thought she deserved, but she was entitled to scream at her soon-to-be future ex, and he couldn't stop her, and she gets a full 10 minutes to finally tell him what she thinks of him. And that was worth 10 or 15 million to her. God bless.
I have a question. The example you gave, or to repeat what you heard, right? Is there, I was late, I'm sorry, is there?
To repeat what the person told you so you can reiterate what you think they heard so they understand. That I agree and I accept. But then
And that's called either active listening or reflective listening.
Right. But then the continued follow-up, is there anything else? I feel like you're, and by continually asking that and saying that, which you suggested, I feel like kind of opening up a can of worms. It reminds me of a scene from My Cousin Vinny when she's like my biological clock and, you know, my niece, the daughter of my sister, and this and that. He just goes on her. Is there any other shit we can pile on? How do you avoid kind of that reaction from the other side?
So I would start by combining it with Dave's question, that if that's hiding in the background, if her biological clock is really important to her, if we don't give her a chance to say it, it's going to be there and it's going to influence all of the negotiations. And so it's probably better to bring it out and put it on the table than to have it as a hidden influencer that does it. So I would much rather, one of the rules of taking depositions, you take a deposition is just to get it on the table, to put them down on the record so that they know what it has. I don't want to be surprised at trial. So I want to ask them whatever their story is going to be, even though they're going to give me the worst possible answer, I'd rather ask them the question and get their answer at the deposition, and now I can go home and I can prepare for that answer. And if they say anything differently at trial, I'm going to beat them up with it. So I'd rather get it out on the table. Give me all the lists. And I would, if I were in that position, I would pull out a sheet of paper and start taking notes. Okay, let me see if I understand. Number one is I showed up late to the wedding and to our anniversary dinner. Number two is that your biological clock is ticking. I didn't give you the child that I promised you. Is there anything else? And just take it down. And it's cathartic. And it's a lot better to put it down and list it and know it, and then figure out how we're going to deal with it. Okay, can I put this down for a couple of hours? Can we come back? You know what? This weekend, I'm working really hard this week. How about Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, we'll go out for brunch and we'll discuss all of these issues, and let's put our heads together and see what we can do to resolve it. Because the old rule of game theory is that when we're working together, we can find much better solutions than any one of us separately. Now, I can go on for a bit, but Dave is like pulling the mic away. So thank you very much. Thank you for your undivided attention.